What's up, history buffs and truth seekers? You think you know the story of how the mighty Roman Empire crashed and burned, right? Barbarian invasions, over-the-top emperors, lead poisoning from the pipes. Yeah, that's the story they feed you in school. But what if I told you that's just the tip of the iceberg? What if the real reasons Rome fell were way crazier, way more complex, and a whole lot more relatable to our world today than you could ever imagine? Buckle up, because we're about to dive deep into the hidden truths behind the fall of one of the greatest civilizations in history. This isn't your grandpa's history lesson. We're going full CSI Ancient Rome. So, let's get one thing straight. The Roman Empire didn't just wake up one day and decide to call it quits. There wasn't a single game over moment. It was a slow, agonizing grind to death by 1,000 cuts that took centuries. And a huge part of this slow-motion train wreck was something we're all too familiar with today: an economic meltdown. Picture this. Rome was the king of bling. They were importing silks from China, spices from India, and all sorts of luxury goods. Sounds dope, right? The problem was, they were paying for all this stuff with gold and silver. Their entire economy was based on precious metals, and they were shipping it all out, with not much coming back in. They were basically running a massive trade deficit, draining their treasury one fancy toga at a time. It's like having a champagne taste on a beer budget, but on an imperial scale. To make things worse, the emperors got a brilliant hand. By brilliant, I mean totally disastrous idea. They started debasing the currency. This means they began mixing cheaper metals like copper into their silver coins, the denarius. So, a coin that was once nearly pure silver was suddenly only 50%, then 20%, and eventually it was just a copper coin with a thin silver wash. Imagine getting your paycheck and realizing half of it is monopoly money. That's what was happening. People lost all faith in the currency. Prices went through the roof, hyperinflation ancient style. A loaf of bread that cost a few coins one day could cost a whole bag of them the next. This chaos absolutely wrecked the middle class, wiped out savings, and made basic survival a daily struggle for the average Joe Roman. The economy was basically running on fumes. Now, let's talk about the military. The Roman legions were the baddest fighting force on the planet for centuries. They were disciplined, well-trained, and fiercely loyal to Rome. But by the late Empire, that all changed. The army got too big and way too expensive to maintain. With the economy in the toilet, they couldn't afford to pay their soldiers properly. On top of that, fewer and fewer actual Romans wanted to sign up for the gig. It was dangerous, the pay was trash, and the benefits package was, let's just say, not great. So, what did they do? They started hiring mercenaries. Guys from the Germanic tribes, the Goths, the Franks, the very people they were often fighting. They were called foederati, essentially. Rome outsourced its national security to its rivals. Can you see the problem here? These soldiers had zero loyalty to Rome. Their allegiance was to their general, whoever paid them the most, or to their own tribe. This led to constant civil wars, with ambitious generals using their private armies to make a play for the throne. The army, which was supposed to protect the empire, ended up becoming one of the biggest threats to its stability. It was an absolute mess. And while all this internal drama was going down, there was another crisis brewing that no one could control. The climate. Yeah, climate change isn't just a modern problem. Scientists have studied ice cores and tree rings, and they've found that around the 3rd century, Europe entered a period of cooling and unpredictable weather called the Late Antique Little Ice Age. This meant shorter growing seasons, failed harvests, and widespread famine. When people are starving, they get desperate. This climate chaos didn't just weaken the Roman population through hunger and disease. It also put immense pressure on the barbarian groups living on the frontiers. Their own lands were becoming unlivable. So they started pushing into Roman territory in massive numbers, not just to raid, but to find a new place to live. It wasn't an invasion in the classic sense. It was a mass migration crisis driven by desperation. The Romans, already stretched thin, couldn't handle this wave of humanity flooding across their borders. Their border control was completely overwhelmed. But hold on, it gets even worse. While the climate was getting colder, plagues were getting hotter. The Roman Empire, with its interconnected cities and trade routes, was the perfect breeding ground for pandemics. First came the Antonine Plague in the 2nd century, which might have been smallpox. It killed millions, possibly up to a quarter of the population in some areas. Then, in the 3rd century, the Plague of Cyprian hit. This one was even deadlier. Imagine a pandemic wiping out 5,000 people a day in the city of Rome alone. These plagues didn't just kill people, they shattered the social and economic fabric of the empire. There weren't enough farmers to grow food, not enough workers for the mines, not enough administrators to collect taxes, and not enough soldiers to defend the borders. The government was broke, the population was shrinking, and the cities were emptying out. The empire was quite literally sick and dying from the inside. So you've got a tanking economy, a disloyal military, climate-fueled migrations, and devastating pandemics. It's a perfect storm. And let's not forget the political instability. Being a Roman emperor in the 3rd century was one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. During one 50-year period, known as the Crisis of the 3rd century, there were over 25 different emperors, and almost all of them were assassinated or killed in battle. It was a revolving door of leaders, a non-stop political free-for-all. With no stable leadership, there was no one to steer the ship. The empire became too big and too complicated to govern effectively. Emperor Diocletian tried to fix this by splitting the empire into 2 halves, East and West, with a co-emperor for each. It seemed like a good idea at the time, a way to make it more manageable. But in the long run, it just caused the 2 halves to drift apart. They developed different cultures, different priorities, and they started seeing each other as rivals, not partners. The West, which had fewer resources and faced more pressure on its borders, was the one that ultimately crumbled first. So what's the big takeaway here? The fall of Rome wasn't just about some dudes in horned helmets sacking the city. That was just the final scene of a very, very long movie. The real story, the hidden truth, is that the Roman Empire was hollowed out from within long before the final collapse. It was a complex web of interconnected crises, economic failure, military decay, environmental disaster, pandemics, and political corruption. Sound familiar? Many of these challenges: inflation, reliance on foreign powers, climate change, pandemics, political division, or issues we're grappling with right now. It's a sobering thought. The story of Rome isn't just ancient history, it's a cautionary tale. It shows how even the most powerful civilization can unravel when faced with a perfect storm of problems it can't or won't solve. The empire wasn't murdered. It slowly died from a multitude of diseases that it failed to cure. And that is a lesson that is absolutely timeless. Thanks for sticking with me on this deep dive. If you enjoyed geeking out over history and want more hidden truths uncovered, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure. Let me know in the comments what you think was the biggest factor in Rome's fall. Until next time, stay curious.